Hey guys, Ben with BigStuff here. Welcome to another version 2.5 firmware update. So today we're going to be talking about traction control. And we have greatly improved the traction control capabilities in the software from previous versions. And if you can't get down with everything we can allow to do right now, well, I don't know what the fix is going to be, because obviously you're going to go as fast as possible without having to use any type of traction control. But if you want to use it, we've given you way more options now with this update. There's no cost of this. You're going to be able to get this for free as long as you have a Gen 4 application to load this into. Okay, so again, this is only going to apply to version 2.5 firmware or newer. So let's get into it. Okay, so you got to have the SR2 option first. If you don't have the SR2 option on the EC, you can give us a shout. Go talk to your dealer and get this action or this option enabled. It's 150 bucks. And then once you're going to come over here, you're going to come over here to the SR2 selection, okay? So in previous versions of the software on the engine torque management select, okay, you've only had the ability to choose either dry shaft RPM or engine RPM. With this current version, okay, you're going to be able to do both. So right now, currently, I have dry shaft RPM selected. And if I come over here and look, and I click on my SR2 ATM and I look at my drive shaft RPM selected curves, I have everything that has to do here with just the drive shaft. All right, so just drive shaft showing only. If I click on engine RPM now, let's just say I want to control the engine RPM. Well, now if I come over to SR2, I'm only going to have the engine RPM available to use to control that engine RPM curve target. Well, now if I choose dry shaft and engine RPM together, well, holy moly, now you're going to have everything to work with as far as the dry shaft curve and the engine RPM curve, okay? So what we're going to do is you're basically going to have the exact same options to use on both the dry shaft and the engine. So what I'm going to do is not be overwhelmed with data for this first part. We're just going to choose dry shaft, okay? And we're going to go in the dry shaft section and we're going to look at everything that's inside here. All right. So the first thing you're going to notice here at the very top is that you have an SR2 Gear 1, dry shaft, ETM, and dwell curve. So basically what we're doing here is we're combining all the curves into one. Now you may have noted right here where it says dwell. You now have the ability to ride and reduce dwell or add dwell if you'd like to. Dwell is a great way to kill power. It's all you're doing is if you have a coil and plug application, you're taking the firepower and you're actually reducing it based on going over or under the curve. So just like if you ride a curve and you're adding or subtracting timing or you're actually doing ignition cut, you can also do the same thing with the dwell. So there's three levels to this. You can think of the ETM as ignition cut. That's really harsh. That's really going to start to rev limit the engine to control power. That's only power reduction. Then you're going to have your engine timing, okay, the spark advance. That's basically like your middle control, if you would, because obviously as the timing is pulled out, it's pretty smooth. You're just simply pulling an engine timing to reduce the torque. Or if you're below your curve, you can add timing in. So if you're a big tire guy, you want to get up on that tire. When you leave, you can shove some timing in for a certain amount of time based on being under the curve, or by simply using the SR2 Gear 1 curves. The SR2 Gear 1 curve is just simply a time-based timing application where you can shove in timing as well. We're just talking about the dry shaft curve. So if you're not at your dry shaft curve you could also shove some timing in if you're below it, okay? So if I come down here and I just choose this very first window, you're going to see here that we have a lot of data going on here, okay? You're going to see here that we have an SR2 Gear 1 Spark Curve Advance. So this is basically where I can configure a first gear leave for this number 1. Okay, so if SR2 number 1 is chosen, let's just say when I leave, I'm going to pull nothing on the first 100th, and then over here I'm going to actually pull, I'm just, for example, 10 degrees, and then I want it all to be back in by 3.23 seconds. I can make that 0, so I'm going to interpolate this row here, highlight that row, come over here to where it says interpolate, left click, and then I'm going to 0 all the rest of this out. Okay, so there's my first gear curve right there. Something very simple, something very basic. I launch at 0.33. I'm ripping out 10 degrees. Then I'm going to ramp it back in over 3 seconds. You can change the length of this SR2 gear one spark curve. Right now it's set up for 10 seconds. Let's just say you're a drag racer. You want to make it something much shorter. Let's just say 4 seconds. Okay. So now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to highlight this row, hit interpolate, and now you can see here that I'm only going out to 4 seconds on this curve, and that's it. Okay. Now you're going to want to adjust this ramp as well. Okay, because now I want to still go out to my 3 seconds, so I can come over here, go from that 10 to the 0, and then boom, now I can go out that far. Okay, so this is going to be the gear curve. This is not the dry shaft curve itself. If I go down to this next window here, this is where it's actually going to show you where you have your 3 curves. So right now, all 3 of these curves are set for 10,000. I can go up to 6 seconds of time. And this is where I can show an ETM dry shaft curve. I can show my SR2 dry shaft curve and my dwell. Remember, all 3 of these are going to have separate tables that they're going to work with to either control or add power. And remember, you can only add power in the SR2 table or the dwell table. Most guys aren't going to shove in dwell. The dwell is simply going to be there to reduce the firepower a little bit. Again, that's more of the fine state of control, if you would, to simply reduce some firepower. So when you're going down, you're just simply taking the lightning bolt and just calm it down a little bit to try to reduce a little bit of power. Okay. So you're going to see here that everything is set for 10,000 RPM. Okay. So now where do we start? Let's build a curve. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a log right now, and I have a log open right here. Okay. So the green right here is engine RPM. The white is dry shaft. The red is the SR2 timer. That's our race timer in our world. Okay. So what I've done here is in this logger, I have loaded up in our dry shaft application, okay, where it says dry shaft RPM, I have loaded up our dry shaft curve. Okay, so how did I do that? In the logger section, you have these 3 dots that you can see here for click for more options. Okay, if I click those more options, I can do a show XY data log plot. I want to select that. Okay, these 2 fields are now going to open up. The x-axis is always going to be my race timer. Okay, so that's this red line down here in my logger. The RPM toss is the purple. So when I load those 2 up, there's my dry shaft curve being populated here on this table. Okay, so this is just a single table for the SR2 dry shaft RPM curves, SR2 desired dry shaft RPM curves. I can look at that in my logger, or if I wanted to see it bigger, I can come out here to SR2, dry shaft RPM related curves. Then I can look for that window, which is this one right here, SR2 desired RPM curves, dry shaft RPM. Okay, left click on that. Now I can actually see it way bigger versus being in that logger view. All right. So in the logger or out here in this main view here, if I left click on this purple icon, it's going to say fit curve to data. So let's left click it. Okay. And what it did here was it actually took this first curve here and just basically averaged out the values and threw it on top of this curve. Now, this isn't perfect at all. This isn't something to where it's going to probably work for what you're trying to do, but it's just something to get you somewhat in the ballpark of what it is. So if I go down here in my left-hand corner, I can take that first dot, I can drag it around, I can grab the second dot, I can drag it around. This is where you can start playing with stuff here, okay? So here you can see here it's got a bunch of room. Here you can see it's way under the curve. But this is where you can start to play with stuff as far as getting the curve manipulated. So I can just take these dots and drag them up out of the way. So let's just say I wanted to go between this very last dot and this dot down here, and I want to interpolate it all the way up, okay? So I'm going to go to the 1722. I'm going to highlight all these dots. You'll see them all go red right here. Okay, they're red. These are blue because I don't have them highlighted. I'm going to click interpolate down here in the lower right hand corner. Okay, now it just shoved all those dots way up there. Okay, so now I'm way over my curve. Again, this is representation. You can take the time out. You can come in here and start hugging your curve as much as you want, okay? Depends on how tight you want them to be. So let's just say I'm going to highlight these guys now, and I'm going to subtract by 200. Okay, so now you can see I'm getting pretty close to sit on top of that curve. Again, for representation only. So let's just say here I'm going to use this curve here, and let's just say I wanted to make harder curves for these tracks for the dry shaft curve itself. Well, I can highlight this line. Okay, I'm going to go Control C. That's going to copy it to my clipboard. I'm going to go Control V. Okay, now I've made number 2 the same exact RPM target, and I'm going to go Control V for the third. So now literally every curve is exactly the same. So let's just say I wanted to make this curve a little hotter. So I'm going to highlight my second curve. I'm going to go plus 300. Okay, again, this is representation only. And then for my third curve, I'm going to go plus 600. Okay, so now you can see here, excuse me, I'm building curves and they're moving up. And I now have 3 curves populated based on this timing curve. Okay, I'm sorry, based off this dry shaft RPM. This is just this piece of data that I'm using as an example. Okay. So now this is built. The dry shaft curve is built. Well, to make this really fast, okay, remember SR2 is timing, right? I'm going to highlight all these boxes. I'm going to go Control C. So now I'm going to close this window down. SR2 ETM, go back on my dry shaft. I was just inside this window. I'm going to go to the ETM now. I'm going to highlight all these and I'm going to go Control V. Boom. So now those same exact curves, okay, are loaded, okay, in this window. Now, let's just say I wanted to transfer the dry shaft on this window as well. So I got to have a data log that's loaded, which I have this log that's loaded, okay? So now I'm going to come over here to the 3 dots. I'm going to grab the 3 dots. I'm going to do show XY data log plot. Okay, so now we're going to have 2 x-axis or an x-axis and a y-axis that show up. This is the ETM desired RPM curves. So x-axis field, I'm at the pull down. I'm going to press the letter S. I'm going to go find SR2 timer. SR2 timer. Okay. Then this is the dry shaft sensor. So I want to look for RPM underscore toss. So press the R. I'm going to look for RPM underscore toss right there. And there you go. So now I've loaded up that dry shaft curve on this window as well. So I still have this data copied to the clipboard. Let's go to the dwell. SR2, dry shaft RPM, dwell desired curves. I got nothing in here. They're all maxed out. Okay. I'm going to go Control V. There we go. So now all of the windows, your SR2, which is timing, your ETM, which is the ignition cut, and your dwell all have the exact same curves. So now if I choose curve number 1, all of them are targeting the same curve. Now, obviously you can change that to be anything you want, but in these easy steps, I've now made all the dry shaft curves and they're now complete. Okay. So now that I've made all these complete, and again, you can do the same thing for this dwell window. If you want to see the dry shaft sensor on this dwell window, again, 3 dots, show XY data log plot, SR2 timer, right there. Y-axis field is going to be the RPM underscore toss, and boom, there you go. So now on my dwell table, I can see this curve as well, which is the same exact curve, desired curves for the timing and the ETM as well. Okay, so all that's built. So now that I've built these curves, so now I need to know, okay, what am I going to do based on the power reduction as far as those curves go? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at dry shaft RPM related curves, and down here are your error tables. Okay, this is what's going to happen when you either go over or under your curves that you've programmed. Okay, so I'm going to highlight the SR2 ignition timing error table, and this is what's going to come up. This table is going to be how it's going to apply or subtract timing based on your curve and where you're going over or under. So in the big stuff world, when you're going over the curve, it's actually going to be a negative number. So the farther you go over your curve, okay, it's going to go down. So what I'm saying in this curve is if I'm perfectly on my curve or above it, okay, I'm sorry, below it, I'm going to be at 0. Okay, and again, if I'm below the curve, I'm going to be up here, and I'm not going to do anything. This is adding nothing. This is all zeroed out. Now, if I start going over my curve, this is where I'm going to start getting my negative values. So this is where I'm going to start pulling timing. So what I'm saying here is I'm 300 RPM over my target. I'm going to pull 15 degrees out. If I'm 43 RPM over my target, I'm going to pull 2 degrees out. Okay, so you can see here that up to 5.97 seconds or 6 seconds, I'm allowing this table to work. Now, let's just say I got a big tire car and for the first 60 feet, I actually want to let it shove in 5 degrees, okay, if for some reason I'm actually below my curve. Well, I would just make this equal to 5. Okay, so now if I'm actually underneath my target, I'm going to give it 5 degrees to add to my curve to help it get up to the curve. If I get up to the curve, then it'll go back to 0, and then hopefully it'll just sit there. But you're only doing it for the first second here. Once you get out of the first second, it's gone. You could also peel it out a little bit. You could say, okay, at 1 second, I'm going to let it interpolate to 1.48. Okay, you could use this button up here where it says interpolate horizontal, and then this way it'll peel the timing out versus that abrupt just 5 to 0 fall off a cliff. Okay. But this table is the error table that you're going to use to configure your ignition timing based on either going above or below. Remember, if you're going above, it's going to show a negative value, okay? If you're under your curve, it's going to show a positive value, okay? The ellipse in the data logger will show you where you're at in your run inside here as you're going down. So if you're over your curve, you'll see the ellipse move down in here. If you're under your curve, you'll see the ellipse move up in here, okay? Because this is the error RPM that's being calculated based off of your curve, okay? It's all about the error for these tables. That's why this vertical column is so important. This is the error from your target, okay? So again, 300 under, I'm going to add in this top row. 300 over, I'm going to pull 15 degrees out of whatever my current timing target is, okay? That's how the SR2 timing error table works. If I come over here now and I go down to my ETM, remember ETM, okay, engine torque management, this can only reduce power. So what I'm saying here is that if I am underneath my curve, okay, I'm going to be at 0. Remember, as I start to go over, it's a negative number. So what I'm saying here is if I'm 100 RPM over my curve, I'm going to apply 27 ETM number, okay? Now, if there's other things that are going on with ETM, okay, the lowest number wins. So in this case, if this number here is 27, but my EGT safety just came on, that was 20, the ETM safety is going to win. It's not going to apply this 27. We only spit out what is the lowest number to use based on everything that's going on calculation-wise for the ETM at that point. The reason being is because the lowest value needs to win based on that having the highest priority for the type of work that it's doing, okay? So at the very bottom here, we're saying, okay, for 300 RPM over, we're going to let it have an ETM value of 20, okay? So that 20 is going to basically be about a 33% power reduction, okay? So you can adjust this table all you want. I have guys that simply make this down here 20 instead of being 20. They want it 25. And then you can highlight this entire table and you can click on interpolate vertical. And now you'll see here that it's a much smaller window that they can get down to. They can only apply 25. It all depends on the combination of what you're trying to kill, okay? If you have a supercharged engine, you know, big old blower sticking out, you have a big old screw, those are taking a lot of horsepower turn. And one of those big Hartz blowers, a big Pro Charger, then you're going to basically not have, you don't need much ETM because there's so much drag on the engine anyways. It's trying to bring the engine down to begin with. You don't necessarily have to apply a big amount of torque reduction because that's actually helping you out. But you can fine tune it to your heart's content on this table. Okay. The last one's going to be the dwell. So if I come down here, my dwell error table, again, this is very simple. This is if I start to go over my curve, we'll just start pulling some dwell out. Remember, this is going to be in the dwell table charge chart. So if I come over here to my ignition settings, dwell time table, this only works on coil and plug applications. This is not a CDI box. This is not for dumb coils. This is only when we're actually in charge of smart coils that this will actually work. So you can see here that up to 4,000 RPM and above, I'm at 4 milliseconds in this case of charge time. So what this would mean is that if I'm 300 RPM over my dwell curve, it's going to take 1 millisecond out of the 3, and I'll be down to 3 milliseconds based on the curve going over my predetermined curve. So again, that's why we call this the fine amount of adjustment. This simply just says I'm going to reduce some firepower out in order to keep the car accelerating on the curve. Okay, so that is all of the ways you can have the power management be applied with all of your different curves. Now, all of these guys here are just simply all the curves grouped together differently. Okay, so if I was to choose numbers 1, 2, or 3 in my SR2, then we're just combining them all in these windows. Okay, this is going to shove all of them all together. So if I choose this one here, you'll see here that you've got up to 9 different spark curves you can play with. Okay, and you're going to have your SR2 3 curves here in this basic mode. We have an advanced mode we're going to make a different video on, but you can see here that the 9 different spark curves are up, depending on how you programmed in your different SR2 first gear leave one curves. And then over here are all of the curves that we had built earlier for the ETM SR2 and dwell. Okay, you can see them all highlighted right here. So in this section, we just simply will just take and group stuff together to put them all certain places and combine them. So this SR2 spark curve table one here, this top here, is the same as this. It's the same exact thing. We've just combined it into one section. So if you click here, you'll see here that it's all the data, okay, of everything all combined into one, if that's how you want to view it. All right. So if I close this back out, come back to SR2, I can just simply go back to my SR2 desired dry shaft curves, and there it is. Okay, so that's the dry shaft. If I was to come back in here at SR2 selection and do dry shaft, engine RPM, I can go through and I can configure the engine RPM to do everything the same exact way. All right, so inside here in the engine RPM, you can see they're all still at 10,000. All right. So if I take my cursor, my fill-in tool here, the fit curve to data, it's going to get really wonky because it's got a lot of ups and downs. So if I left click on that, okay, again, it's just taking the averages of where all those guys are. So I'd have to come in here and grab that first dot and bring it on down here again. It just depends on how hard you want to clobber it, but you can just take this thing and just start fitting the curve to the data however you want to happen, however you want it to be controlled. I can interpolate from, or I can just grab these boxes here. Again, I can lay stuff over. So if I wanted to go up and just grab this dot here, let's see here, right, that. Okay, that's this 8072. If I grab this dot here, that's a 6812. I can highlight that row. You see them all go red and interpolate. You know, again, it just depends on how you want to configure these boxes here. You can have it ride this thing. It's fully up to you as far as how tight you want to get on these curves. But the functionality is there, and the functionality is exactly the same as what we just did for the dry shaft. You'll simply just build a curve, okay, and then you can take that same exact curve and you can then copy and paste it to the other lines, and you can have differing levels as far as how it's going to be applied. Okay, so if you were to do all this now, right, I'm just going to just take this dot. My LCD is going crazy here. And just take this dot here just to say I wanted to get it out of the way, interpolate it like that. Okay, so now basically I'm just kind of hugging first gear, and that's it. Once I'm out of first gear, I basically just let it go and just do its thing here. Okay, again, demonstration purposes only. You understand what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so now I've built this curve for the engine. All right, so the same exact rules apply for my error tables. If I was to go down to my error tables, everything's the same. If I go over or under, I'm going to apply the same exact rules. So if I come over here to engine RPM, okay, SR2 error timing table, there you go. It's the same exact style table. Everything works exactly the same. If I'm going over the curve, I'm going to start to pull timing. If I'm under the curve, I can throw in some timing as well. It doesn't matter. It's the same exact style curves you're going to have for the SR2, which is timing, the E10, which is your ignition cut, and the dwell. All right. So those are going to be your error tables down here to work with. Now, this is where it gets different. The dwell was the power management that we introduced. Now you can do both. So now if you choose dry shaft and engine RPM, you're going to have the ability to have dry shaft and engine RPM curves to be able to plot to. So at the same time when you're going down track, you can use both. Okay. So now that I built that engine RPM plot, you can see here that if I look at it in the log review, there's the engine RPM curve that I created that I can ride. And then there's my dry shaft curve up here that I created that I can ride. You can fully adjust it based on the SR2 error tables for both. But this is a game changer for this release. You can now ride both at the same time. Okay. So we have one more piece of traction control that we're going to cover on a different video, which is this curve mode. Okay, you now have the ability to go into an advanced mode, and the advanced mode lets you actually change the time axes per timing tune-up. I should say per SR2 tune-up. So you're going to have up to 9 different curves, and in those 9 curves, you can actually custom tailor the time axis for every curve. So you could have, for example, 1/10 of a second to 5 seconds for curve 1. Well, for curve 2, maybe you want to be 1/10 of a second and only out to 3 seconds. So you can fine tune your curves based on the amount of time per curve that you want to build it to. You can go crazy. So that's going to be the advanced mode. We're going to cover that on a different video. But the dry shaft and engine RPM for us for this release is very big. You now have the ability to go in here and do both at the same exact time. You just have to make sure that your error tables are configured correctly as far as the timing, ignition cut, and the dwell. Okay. By all means, if you have any questions, you can give us a shout here at our office. Give us an email, support@bigstufftpm.com. Check out our socials for any updates there. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. This is going to be brand new for this release, where you can ride both if you would like, but definitely a game changer for us. And again, if you already have SR2, the option purchase, there is no additional cost for this. This is just simply going to come as part of the update. If you don't have SR2 traction control and you want to enable this, it's $150. Reach out to your dealer, reach out to us, we activate it for you, and then it's all there. Okay? By all means, have a great day. Please reach out to us. Again, one more time, BigStuffTPM.com is our website. Support@BigStuffTPM.com is the email. And check out our socials on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.